Hello coders, today we are going to learn about creating and using arrays in JavaScript. Okay guys, so let's start by learning about creating arrays in JavaScript. Creating an array in JavaScript is really easy to do. All you have to do is use the var keyword and then name our array. I'm just going to name this one my array and then set it equal to a new array. And then you're going to open up your parentheses and then enter some values. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to enter in this comma is comma an array. Oop. Okay, and then end it with a semicolon. And essentially what we've done here is we've created a quick array that is filled with 4 elements that are all strings. Okay, so that's really easy to do, right? Okay, and so this method of creating an array is essentially using the array constructor and the new keyword. And okay, so this is our array constructor and this is our new keyword. But there are other ways of creating an array that may be a little easier and a little faster. And to do this, we just simply have to write out var new array and then set it equal to open square brackets. That's really important. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and end with a semicolon. Okay, so what we have now is we have 2 arrays that are being created, one that contains just strings and one that contains just numbers. I usually prefer the second method because it is a little bit faster, you know, a couple of milliseconds maybe, but you know, it is a little bit nicer to do that sometimes. So, and this is possible because arrays are essentially treated like objects in JavaScript. So, you know, it is a little confusing, but we're going to dive into that a little bit later on. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is accessing a specific index of an array, and that's really easy as well. But the first thing I'm going to show you is that you can do a document.write statement, okay? And you can write out my array. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to write out everything that's inside of my array. So it should say this, comma, is, comma, an array. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here, and we got it, right? That's exactly what we wanted it to do. But let's say we wanted to access a particular index of this array. And to do that is, you know, again, it's really easy. So I can just open up my square brackets here and say 0. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to access the first index of the array called my array. Okay, so essentially all we're doing is we're saying document.write my array, so we're immediately going to go up and look at this array. And then it's saying look at the first index of this array, which is this. Okay, so let's make sure that it is printing out the right value. And again, it is printing out the right value. So go back up here. So now that we know that it's getting the right value, the question is, why is 0 the first value? Well, all arrays start at the value of 0. So every time you create an array, the first element in that array is always going to be 0. So for example, this string is the 0 index of the array, my array. And the value of 1, or the number 1, will be at index 0 of new array. Okay, and it increases by 1 every time. So this is index 0, is index 1, and is index 2, and so on. Pretty easy stuff, right? As long as you know that, you can pretty much always get the index that you're looking for. Okay, so now that we know how to access specific indexes, the next thing I want to show you is creating an array that has multiple data types inside of it. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to remove our document.write statement, and I'm going to say var mixed array is equal to open my square brackets, and I'm going to say 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is an array that is mixed, right? So all we have here is, you know, 4 elements again. 2 of them are strings and 2 of them are number values. And you know, this is possible because JavaScript doesn't really discriminate against particular data types. The array is not of a particular data type. Like in C#, for example, you would have to say what sort of data type this array is going to contain. But with JavaScript, you don't have to do that. So we can just very easily, you know, put multiple values into an array. Okay, so another kind of cool thing that you can do with arrays is creating a multi-dimensional array. A multi-dimensional array is essentially an array that contains other arrays. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with creating our multi-dimensional array. And to do this, I'm going to say var multi-array and set it equal to open square brackets. What I'm immediately going to do now is open up another square bracket here. And so essentially all that's saying is this is an array, and then there's another array inside of this. And my first dimension is going to just contain 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then I'm going to put in a comma, and I'm going to go 4, 5, 6, another comma, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so what we essentially have here is an array that is 3 by 3. If I wanted to change this array to have strings in it, I could easily say, 4, 5, and 6. These are now strings. All right, one thing that is important when using a multidimensional array is, accessing these indexes. Okay, well, how do I access an array inside of an array? Okay, and to do that, again, it's pretty easy to do. And some of you might have already guessed this, but in order to do this, we're just going to use our document.write statement again. And I'm going to say multi-array. And then we're going to say we want to look at index 0. Okay, and then of index 0, we're going to look at index 1. Okay, so the value that should be printed here should be 2, right? Because we're looking at this first index of multi-array, which is this array here, and then we're looking at the second index of that array, which is 2. So let's check and make sure that that actually printed out. And again, we're back down to 2, which is exactly what we thought it should be. Okay, so again, accessing a specific index of a multidimensional array is really easy, right? Okay, that's all we're going to cover for creating arrays. The next thing that we are going to cover is a few of the properties and methods for arrays. The properties are really useful and can really help us when we're working through or with arrays. And one of those properties is the .length property of an array. The .length the length property of an array simply returns a count of the number of items inside of an array. So if we run this on one of the arrays, we will get back the number of elements inside of that array. Okay, so to do this, I'm just going to do a document.write statement. And I'm actually going to add a break here so that way we don't get our values confused. And I'm going to say new array .length. Okay, and semicolon. All right, and so what this is going to do is it's going to return the number of elements that we have in our new array. So I'm just going to scroll down, and again, okay, 4, right? So that's getting the right number of elements. And this can be used on any of these arrays. The .length property is awesome. You are going to use this. I mean, if you've never seen it before, then write it down, go practice, because I guarantee you're going to use it in the future. All right, so as awesome as that is, there's not a .length specific to multidimensional arrays. So if I were to change this statement up here and change it to the multi-array, what do you think is going to be output now? Okay, if you said 3, then you're absolutely right. And that can be a little confusing. Okay, there we go. Okay, if you said 3, then you're absolutely right. And essentially what's happening here is it's only looking at the first level of elements inside of this multidimensional array. So it's looking at the elements of each array. Okay, so when we're getting the length, it's only going to look at the first level. So it's going to count each of these arrays as a single element. Well, that's not really cool, right? So what if we're going to be working with multidimensional arrays a lot? We definitely don't want to not be able to get the length property, or get a count of the number of elements, right? Like, that's kind of useless at that point. So one thing that you can do is create a really sort of quick and dirty solution, and I don't advise this. I'm going to show you another solution really quickly after this, but One solution to find the count of a multidimensional array is by creating a new variable, and I'm just going to call this multicount, and set it equal to the multiarray 0, so the first index of the multiarray dot length plus multiarray 1 dot length plus multiarray 2 dot length. Okay. And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to get the length of each of the arrays that is inside of this initial array and combine those counts together, so we should be returned 9. So if I change out this statement here and just print out the multi-count, then we should get an updated value of 9 down here. So let's just zoom back out. There we go, 9. So that's right. But this solution is not even remotely extensible, right? You have to know how many arrays or how many dimensions you have in order to use this method of getting the count of a multidimensional array. And anytime that you sort of code yourself into a corner like that, where you have to know the value, and the only way to get that is by knowing how many dimensions there are, that's definitely a bad thing. Okay, so like I said earlier, there's an easier way to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start doing that. I'm going to go ahead and show you the easier way to do that by erasing this current statement and just setting multicount equal to 0. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here so that way you guys can really see what's going on. Okay. To accomplish what we're trying to get the count of a multidimensional array, we can create a for loop. So I'm going to go ahead and create our for loop, set var I equal to 0, and then I'm going to say while I is less than multiarray dot length I plus plus. Okay, so essentially what this is going to do is it's going to iterate 3 times. We know it's going to iterate 3 times because we know how many indexes are inside of the multi-array. But even if we didn't know that, this variable I essentially is just going to continue to go as long as it is less than the number of indexes that are in the initial array. So now that we know that we're going through each of the indexes, we also need to figure out, okay, so now that we know the number of indexes that are in the initial array, we also need to figure out how to increase our count variable to reflect the total number of elements inside this array. I'm just going to set multicount plus equal to multiarray square bracket of I dot length. Okay, essentially this works by increasing the value in multicount by the length of the current index in multiarray. Okay, this should return a value of 9. So let's zoom out real quick. There we go. Value of 9. So that's just a really sort of easy way to get the total count of a multiarray inside of JavaScript. I should point out though, this will not work if you've got another array embedded in another level of array inside of this. So if I were to add another array here, so I'm going to add one into multi-array. Actually, let me zoom in real quick so you can see this. So I'm going to add another array at the second index of the first index of multi-array. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say this is going to be equal to 2 and 2. Okay, now what do you think the value is going to be? If I zoom back out, it's still going to be 9, right? This is because, and as you can see, this changed as well, because we're still printing out multi-array index 1. Okay, so that's why that changed. But the reason why this is still at 9 is because we're not stepping into that next level in this statement. And you could do that by checking to see, is this an array? And if it is, get the count and everything like that. But again, just a really simple example. I'm sure you guys can extend this yourselves to get the total count of a multi-array. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about are some really useful methods to use with arrays in JavaScript. And one of these methods is the TwoString method, which converts all of the elements inside of an array to a string and then combines all of those together. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to remove a lot of this code so we only have the new array. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of that. I'm going to zoom back in. Okay, so again, we're back down to our initial array, and I did that just to sort of clean things up a little bit. All right, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say my array dot TwoString. Okay. Now, if I zoom out, you'll notice that there's nothing being printed out here. And that's because essentially all we're doing is saying convert this to a string. But what I want to do here is I want to see what the output is. And to do that, I can just say document.write my array TwoString. I need to remove that semicolon. Okay, so now the semicolon's been moved, and there we go. Essentially, it's printing out each index as a string. And so this works on strings as obviously this works on strings. It also works on numbers. So if I change this array to contain only numbers, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, it's just going to print out, it's just going to convert the value to a string and then write it to the screen. So pretty easy, right? Pretty useful. If you want to write out each index of an array and everything like that, you can do that. It's pretty easy. You can do that with a for loop as well, but this method exists, so maybe you don't have to do that. Okay, another method that is really similar to the TwoString method is the join method. And the join method is a little different because it allows us to specify the separator between the elements of the array. And what do I mean by the separator? So the separator is just this comma you're seeing here. So that is what is separating out the values in this between these strings. So I'm going to go ahead and do, I'm going to go ahead and show you an example of that. So if I just do document.write my array dot join. Okay, and then inside of these parentheses, we're going to open up a string, and I'm just going to say, there we go. So I'm just going to put, the two pipes, or the or, I guess, and then add my semicolon, and essentially this should do 1 space, 2 pipes space, 2, and then, continue on from there. So if I just scroll down, why is it printing out both? Oh, okay. Okay, so if I scroll down, as you can see, it's doing the first document.write, so that's kind of ugly. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that, and now it should update to have 1 and then 2 pipes, 2 space, 2 pipes. So it just allows you to write out your own separator, which is kind of cool. A little bit of fun to play with. So if you're doing like a battleship or something like that, you could easily use pipes as your separators and things like that. I've seen people use like the tilde or the however how you pronounce that, tilde, whatever, or the exclamation points, things like that. There's a bunch of different things you can use as a separator. It's kind of cool. Okay, so moving on. Another really cool and really, really useful method in JavaScript for arrays is the shift method. And the shift method just removes the first element of an array and moves all of the other elements down one place. So what do you think is going to happen here? I'm just going to continue modifying this. So I'm going to just print out document.write my array, and I'm going to, before I print out though, I want to say my array.shift. Okay? And essentially what this is going to do is it's going to drop 1 and then move 2 to the 1 place, 3 to the 2 place, 4 to the 3 place. So if I scroll down, that's exactly what we have, right? That's exactly what we wanted. And that one's really cool just because it allows you to very easily rearrange an array, or if you need to drop a value, something like that. It's pretty cool to be able to do that. Okay, so another really cool method is the unshift method. And essentially all the unshift method does is it adds a new element to the beginning of an array and moves the other elements down one spot. So currently what our code is doing is it's creating a new array that contains 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then immediately after that, it's deleting the 1 from the array and moving 2, 3, and 4 up. Okay, so now 2 is at index 0, 3 is at index 1, and 4 is at index 2. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say my array dot unshift, and I'm going to add 100. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to put 100 where 2 is currently. So at index 0, we will have 100, and then at index 1, we'll have 2. Okay, so if I scroll back, or I'm just going to zoom out. Okay, 100, 2, 3, 4. Doesn't make mathematical sense, but it's still pretty cool, right? Okay. Okay, so both of these methods are really cool for modifying arrays and dropping values. Okay, so one last thing that I wanted to show you before we end this video is that we can change around specific indexes of arrays by setting that index to something new. So essentially what I can do here is I've got my array created, I've got 4 elements inside that array. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to say, okay, I don't like the fact that index 1 is equal to 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say my array index of 1, which again is equal to the value of 2 here, and I'm going to set that equal to 4, semicolon. Okay, so all it's going to do is set the second index of my array equal to 4. So now 2 should be equal to 4. And if I zoom out, there we go. So now it's printing out 1, 4, 3, 4. Again, kind of cool, right? Very easy. Extremely, arrays are really modifiable in JavaScript. A lot of fun to play around with and extremely useful. I guarantee you're going to use them in the future. Okay, guys, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something new about arrays in JavaScript. As always, thanks for watching, and this has been a Renaissance Coders tutorial.